Good morning and welcome. Today, I want to talk about something that makes unity truly unique in the landscape of spirituality and religion. Our founders' radical openness to truth, wherever they found it. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore didn't set out to create a new religion. They set out to find truth. And they were willing to look anywhere, learn from anyone, and integrate wisdom from any source that rang true in their souls. They were seekers in the deepest sense, not people who had all the answers, but people who were courageously asking all the questions. In a time when religious boundaries were even more rigid than they are today, when most churches insisted you had to believe exactly what they believed or face eternal damnation, Charles and Myrtle did something revolutionary. They said essentially, what if God is too big to fit in any one box? What if truth shows up in many forms? What if wisdom can be found in multiple traditions? What if we don't have to choose between Jesus and the Buddha, between Christian prayer and Eastern meditation, between biblical study and metaphysical exploration? This wasn't wishy-washy spirituality. This was courageous seeking. And it shaped unity into what we are today, a community of seekers, bridge builders, and truth lovers. Let's look at where Charles and Myrtle were. In the 1880s and 1890s, Charles had been raised in a fairly traditional Christian environment, but was asking big questions. Myrtle was desperately ill with tuberculosis, and finding no help in conventional religion or medicine, they were both searching not for comfort, but for truth and for what worked. They didn't limit their search to one tradition or one teacher. They were voracious readers, attending lectures, studying with various teachers, exploring ideas that many of their contemporaries would have called sorry about the dog in the background, heretical. Myrtle studied with Emma Curtis Hopkins, often called the teacher of teachers in the New Thought movement. Hopkins herself had studied with Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science, before branching out on her own. So right there, Unity's roots include Christian Science, metaphysical interpretations of Christianity. But the Fillmores didn't stop there. Charles was deeply influenced by Ralph Waldo Emerson and the Transcendentalists, who were themselves drawing from Eastern philosophy. The Fillmores read wildly in what we now call comparative religions, studying Hinduism, Buddhism, and other Eastern traditions. They weren't just curious, they were genuinely seeking wisdom wherever it could be found. And here's what's remarkable. Charles and Myrtle openly taught concepts like reincarnation, an idea that comes from Hindu and Buddhist traditions, not from mainstream Christianity. They weren't trying to replace Christianity, they were trying to expand it, to see it in a larger context of universal spiritual truth. When they started their magazine in 1889, they subtitled it Devoted to the Spiritualization of Humanity from an Independent Standpoint. Independent, not beholden to any single doctrine or denomination, free to seek truth wherever it appeared. Think about what they were doing. In an era of rigid religious boundaries, they were saying, all these traditions have something valuable to teach us. We don't have to reject Jesus to learn from Buddha. We don't have to abandon Christianity to practice meditation. We don't have to choose between prayer and affirmation. We can integrate wisdom from multiple sources into a coherent, practical, powerful spiritual practice. That takes courage, because when you refuse to draw hard lines between us and them, when you refuse to claim that your way is the only way, and when you insist on seeking truth even in unexpected places, some people get very uncomfortable. But the Fillmores understood something essential. God is too big for any one tradition to contain completely. Truth is truth wherever you find it. This brings us to something essential about unity's DNA. We are, by our very nature, uniters rather than dividers. The name itself, unity, says what we're about. Not the one true church, not the only way. Unity, bringing together, finding common ground, recognizing that underneath our different languages and practices and tradition, we're all seeking the same thing, connection with the divine, understanding of our purpose, love that heals and transforms. The Fillmores lived this. They built relationships with spiritual teachers from many traditions. They published articles exploring diverse spiritual perspectives. They created a community where people could come from different backgrounds and all be welcome. They weren't abandoning Christianity. They were expanding it to include the universal truths that Jesus himself taught. Love your neighbor. Don't judge. Forgive endlessly. See God in everyone. These aren't narrow, exclusive teachings. They're universal spiritual principles that show up in every wisdom tradition. Now, here's something we need to be honest about. Some have rigid beliefs and use religion as a weapon to spread hate rather than love. Unity is about seeking truth, uniting, and spreading love, which is why some are drawn to it and others repelled by it. The Fillmores gave us a different model. They taught us to seek truth, not to claim we already have all truth, to ask questions rather than demand everyone accept our answers, to build bridges of understanding, not walls of separation. And there's freedom in that, freedom to explore and to question, to seek and grow. That's what the Fillmores did, and that's what unity still offers. Let me give you some specific examples of what the Fillmores learned from different traditions, because this isn't just an abstract theory. This is practical wisdom that shapes how we practice unity today. From Eastern traditions, particularly Hinduism and Buddhism, the Fillmores embraced meditation as a spiritual practice, not just prayer. They explored reincarnation as a framework for understanding spiritual evolution. They studied the concept of karma, that our actions have consequences that extend beyond this lifetime. They embraced the idea that divinity dwells within each person, not just as a metaphor, but as a literal truth. They incorporated practices of mindfulness and presence. From others in the New Thought movement, and teachers like Emma Curtis Hopkins, they learned the power of thought to shape reality. They discovered affirmative prayer instead of begging or petitioning. They practiced denial and affirmation, releasing false beliefs and claiming truth. They came to understand that God is principle, not just a person. From Christian Science and Mary Baker Eddy's work, they explored the unreality of disease and limitation, the primacy of spiritual reality over material appearance, and the healing power of understanding truth. From the transcendentalist and thinkers like Emerson, they absorbed the over soul concept that we're connected in the one divine mind. They learned about self-reliance rooted in spiritual understanding, the divinity of nature and all creation, and intuition as a valid source of spiritual knowing. And through it all, they remained devoted to Jesus and his teachings, but they interpreted Jesus through an expanded understanding. They saw him not as the only Son of God, but as one who fully realized what we all are, sons and daughters of the divine. They understood the Christ not as the last name for Jesus, but as the divine potential in every human being that Jesus demonstrated most fully. This is what it means to be a seeker. You don't reject your traditions, you expand it. You don't abandon your roots, you let them grow deeper and wider. And here's what's beautiful. When you do this, you discover that the core truths are the same. Every major spiritual tradition teaches some version of love, compassion, forgiveness, seeing the divine in others, treating people as you'd want to be treated. The surface differences are real, but they're like different languages expressing the same essential truth. Joseph Campbell once pointed out that there are no snakes, that where there are no snakes, there are no snake gods. In other words, our images of the divine tend to grow out of the world we live in. A culture surrounded by tigers might imagine a tiger god. A desert culture imagines a god of wind and sand. We all describe the infinite through the symbols available to us. And this is key to understanding why spiritual traditions look so different on the surface while sharing the same core truth. We're all trying to describe something that's beyond description, the infinite, the eternal, the divine. We're using the language and imagery we have access to, the metaphors that make sense in our culture, whatever symbols that resonate with our lived experiences. And a people who lives by the ocean will understand God's vastness through the ocean. A people who live in the mountains will understand God's strength through its peaks. And people who live in the forest will understand God's abundance through the trees. The divine doesn't change, but our ways of describing it, our ways of relating to it, our ways of expressing it are shaped by where we are and who we are. This is why there are so many similarities across religions. When you strip away the cultural clothing, the specific rituals, the particular names for God, the unique imagery, you find the same essential truth underneath. Love is greater than hate. Compassion heals. Forgiveness frees. We're all connected. There's something divine at the core of each person. Treating others with kindness matters. Service is sacred. These truths show up everywhere because they are true everywhere. The Fillmores understood this. They could see past the surface differences to the underlying unity. They could honor Jesus while learning from Buddha. They could practice Christian prayer while incorporating Hindu meditation. They could read the Bible while studying other religious texts because they understood that all these traditions have their own cultural language, and they were all pointing to the same divine truth. This doesn't mean all traditions are identical. The differences matter. They enrich our understanding. A tradition shaped by desert life offers insight that a tradition shaped by island life might not emphasize. A tradition developed in a time of persecution will highlight different aspects of the divine than a tradition developed in a time of peace. These differences aren't problems to be solved, they're gifts to be appreciated. But underneath the differences, there's unity. And that's what the Fillmores were seeking. That's what they found. That's what they built unity to celebrate. It takes courage to be a seeker in the Fillmore tradition. It takes courage to refuse easy answers and to keep your heart and mind open to truth from unexpected sources. And it takes courage to be a uniter in a world that profits from division. The Fillmores weren't wishy-washy. They had strong convictions. They just held those convictions with open hands, always willing to learn more, to grow and expand more. Unity has always been a bit countercultural in that way. We've been the ones saying, wait, maybe there's more than one path up the mountain. Maybe God's bigger than one tradition can contain. Maybe love is the answer, not fear. Maybe inclusion is the way, not exclusion. We stand for seeking truth wherever it's found. We stand for learning from multiple traditions. We stand for building bridges between people of different backgrounds and beliefs. We stand for unity, not division. The Fillmores gave us a model. Seek truth courageously. Love inclusively. Learn from everyone. And always prioritize love over dogma. Inclusion over exclusion. Bridge building over wall building. Let's take some time now to embody this spirit of oneness, of seeking bridge building. So go ahead and get comfortable, and if you'd like, allow your eyes to close. If not, just soften your gaze. Take a deep breath in, and as you release it, let your body relax and settle into a comfortable position. Take in another deep breath. Slowly let it out. And imagine yourself standing in a beautiful library. Infinite shelves stretching in all directions. This is the library of human wisdom, containing the spiritual insights of every culture, tradition, every genuine seeker who's ever lived. The books glow with different colored lights. Golden light for one, deep blue for something else, vibrant orange for another, maybe green for indigenous traditions, purple of mystical teachings. Every wisdom path is represented here. And as you look closer, you realize something beautiful. While the books are in different colors on the outside, when you open them, the core message at the heart of each one shines with the same white light, the light of love, the light of truth. You see two figures approaching, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. They're walking through the library with joy and curiosity, stopping at different shelves, pulling books, reading passages, just gathering wisdom. Come with us, Myrtle invites with a warm smile. Don't be afraid to look everywhere. Truth doesn't hide, it reveals itself to genuine seekers. You walk with them, and Charles shows you wisdom glowing with Christian light. Myrtle shows you insights glowing with Buddhist light. You continue walking, and they show you truth from many traditions, all pointing to the same core: love, compassion, shared divinity. You realize you have the discernment to know truth. You can recognize it by how it feels in your soul, by whether it expands or contracts your heart, and whether it includes or excludes, and by whether it serves love. Myrtle takes your hand. You're a seeker now, she says, like we are. Keep your heart open. Keep your mind curious. Keep seeking truth wherever it shows up. And always test what you find against the standard of love. Now we'll enter 1 minute of silence. Simply rest in the library of wisdom, surrounded by truth from many sources. Secure in your ability to discern authentic teaching, committed to seeking with an open heart. As we come back from the silence, take a deep breath. Feel yourself back in this room, carrying with you the wisdom of the library, the example of the Fillmores, and the commitment to seek truth courageously. When you're ready, open your eyes. This week, I invite you to do one of the following. Seek truth in an unexpected place. Read something from a tradition different from your own. Talk to someone whose spiritual practice differs from yours. Stay curious. Or build a bridge. Find common ground with someone you might normally see as different. Look for the shared humanity, the shared seeking, the shared divine nature beneath the surface differences. Or 3, honor your own practice. Dive deeper into Unity's teachings, meditation, prayer, study. Being open to other traditions doesn't mean abandoning your own. It means enriching it. Remember, you're part of a long tradition of seekers. The Fillmores, Emma Curtis Hopkins, Ralph Waldo Emerson, all the way back to Jesus himself, who invited people into a bigger, more loving, more inclusive understanding of God. You are a bridge builder and a truth seeker, and so it is. Thank you.